Welcome. Well, you're going to get to be the first group to hear about some new patent pending technology that's going to be used in the wine and spirits industry. And we have with us today Mike Slone. Now, Mike and I worked together, I want to say 30 years ago. Oh my gosh, 30 years ago, working together in marketing and advertising. And he has now taken the pandemic as an opportunity to look at what could be done in the wine and spirits industry in terms of monitoring and related activities. So he's going to tell you how he spent his pandemic and turned it into a profitable business with a patent pending technology, and then has even found investors in the Los Angeles and California wine country. So I'm just going to read a brief bio on Mike. Mike is a highly experienced and successful product, UX, UI, visual, and branding designer with many years of experience regarding large and small scale designs. He's worked with global companies in many industries, including Caterpillar, Pampered Chef, Deloitte, Nike, and others. He's going to talk to us today about the quality of wine aging in barrels and how it's constantly threatened by smoke from wildfires, fires, bacterial infections, spoilage, yeast, and many other things. And each year, these threats cost billions of dollars. So current monitoring of the risks involved are on an average, limited handful of costly tests kind of situation. So he's got something new, a new wireless and touchless barrel plug. So we're gonna hear more. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. Here you go.
All right, well, that was basically the whole presentation, so see y'all later, bye. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah, so as Dawn mentioned, thanks, Dawn, for inviting me here. It's nice to be back in my hometown after God knows how long. I don't even want to say. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got from this, which is the normal barrel plug you'd use in a wine barrel or any other barrel, to this guy, which is not the real thing, but a 3D printing of it. And it's gonna be weird because I'm using a mic and this, but we'll go through this. So how did I get here? As Dawn mentioned, I was born and raised here. I worked with Julius Friedman for 6 years while he was still living. And during that time, we did a lot of work that involved bourbon making, barrel aging. So that's when I first got exposed to the idea of a wooden barrel and charring and some of the aging process that's involved with that and how long that takes, especially with bourbon, which I love. But so from there, got to California. I'm kind of shortening how this really happened, but I was sitting around one day, my wife said, hey, I heard a guy talking about how he's getting paid to store barrels in a space in California, and all he does is refrigerate it. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna look into this. But what I recognized very early on is that there was no tech. There was zero tech, actually. In the aging stage, fermentation, yes. Other things during bottling, absolutely. But the aging process was behind. There were gaps. And so the gaps, of course, the designer in me thought of their opportunities. So then this thing happened. Well, that's a nice impact, right? It took me forever. Come on. So this happened, and so what happened was with that is that means I then had about 1.5 years in my house, sitting in a room, and I could either watch Tiger King, which I did, or I could start doing something about it. So I had this idea in my head before COVID hit, and I thought, well, screw it, I'm just gonna look into it. So the more I looked into it, the more I realized there might be something to this. So I started putting in the time and the work and the research. And that led to, that's another nice transition there. Yeah, you saw that, right? The blue is perfect. So it led me to what I'm going to present today, which is my vision statement, not the full business plan. You want to sign the NDA, you can see that. It's about 90 slides. But hell no, I'm not showing that. But so this is the main idea, though, about showing what is the challenge, how does it happen, what are the kind of losses they experience, and then what's the solution, and why should it exist in the market? There are a lot of risks to making wine. One of the newer ones, especially out where I live, are wildfires. It's happening more and more. Fires are getting bigger. Fires are invading areas where they are growing grapes. And there's a strange thing about something called smoke taint. And smoke taint is, the idea is that the grapes can be miles away and the smoke will come into the area where they're being grown. Doesn't mean that the fire's right there. The fires could be miles away. And the smoke itself will start to attach to the wine skin, which is kind of waxy to begin with. And it can happen in an early stage, it can happen in a later stage, just depends on when the fire happens. It can ruin the taste of the wine. And a lot of times they do not have a good way to detect this right now. But what happens is they'll send it off to a lab and they'll wait 45 days for a test to come back. Well, they gotta decide if they're gonna harvest in like 2 hours. Otherwise, they might not have anything. So a lot of difficult decisions are being made. A lot of sleepless nights for vineyard owners. There are other things that can happen. Bacteria is a normal thing. That's been around for thousands of years in wine, obviously. And then there's this list of stuff that can happen too. So changes in pH, yeast goes bad. Oxidation means like excessive exposure to oxygen, right? So if it's exposed too much to oxygen, the wine color will start to turn brown. And it can actually start to affect the flavor too. And then too much evaporation. So if your environment is the temperature issues or humidity issues, you might have too much of that. There needed to be a way to give them visibility as to what's going on inside that barrel. Because right now, as it stands, they were kind of blind to it, what was going on. So I developed this device called a Cogni. We like Latin, you get it. But it's designed to give them precise information. It's kind of think of it as like, over time, they'll get to see the history of what's going on inside that barrel. And the tech is pretty nuts. But let's say let me show you first how it happens, or why this is an important thing. So typically in a wine warehouse or in a vineyard, there'll be thousands of barrels, right? For even a medium-sized operation or some of the smaller ones, they're gonna have thousands of barrels. And the crew is about 12 people. 12 to 15. They don't have a chance in hell to get to all those barrels. They got one forklift operator. Literally, I've seen this. One guy who's licensed to operate the forklift. The wine barrels are stacked 6 high, sometimes 8 high. If I gotta get to the barrel down here, you're not gonna get that barrel until the end of the day. So they don't always know what's going on. Only a small sample of them are tested. So it means that I gotta take it out, I gotta take the plug out, I gotta put a piece of paper, some sample of the wine itself, right? Take it off. If I wanna do a real panel, like a full panel, I gotta send it off to a lab and wait a few days and then pay over $300 for that panel every single time. Plus, I'm removing the plug. What's that mean? Oxygen's getting in. The vacuum's gone that was in there before. Lots of things can happen. The other thing too is that when they pay for the test, it's a snapshot. It's like a Polaroid. They're literally just getting a little picture of what's going on in that barrel at that specific day, at that specific time, and not the full, show me the whole playback of what's deltas, what's changing, what's happening over time. They're not seeing that. Tons of barrels go untested or are poorly tested, right? Less tested than they should be. And this is an expensive product. Like, they spend a lot of money on this. This is not a cheap industry to get into. But they're very traditional about it. So a better solution was needed. And the idea was that, okay, you need to be able to have a system that's going to monitor when I'm not there, when I am there, and then tell the crew which ones are the problem children, which ones are ones I should check, and forget about the other 95% that are doing fine. You need early notification systems. In other words, like, what's happening now is that they're waiting until something goes wrong and then reacting how to fix it. What you really need is a system where that's going to tell you, starting to get into the yellow range where bacteria could grow, starting to get into the range where pH might go out of range and be too acidic or too alkaline, something like that. So yeah, I guess I jumped ahead of myself. But this is the idea. They need to be able to understand that over time and see those deltas. The solution is this guy, which is the prettier version of my printout. This is the one that's being developed right now in Silicon Valley. They just started engineering and electronics on this a few weeks back. It's going great. Measures all these things inside. The early beta is going to be some of these right here, and then the second round will be around here. But over time, that's what's going to happen. And these are going to be able to be rechargeable batteries. You don't have to take it out when you have to replace the battery. Battery should last you months. You'll have web application reporting. You'll have alerts based on what happens, no matter what, at any time, really, right? So it works like this. They work in groups, too. So in other words, if I have a batch of 100 barrels, and they're all the same type of grape, and I put sort of a cross-section of these, maybe 10. It doesn't have to be every barrel, but maybe 10. They can talk to each other and say, the barrel that's 5 high, that's got 4% more humidity, is evaporating faster than the barrel that's down here on the ground. So, because the reason why that's important is that a natural part of what you do in this process is that you top it off, right? So the wine is supposed to evaporate over time. The wine is supposed to create headspace because that's why you have the wood. And the tannins and the things build up because of the char inside the... By the way, wine barrels have charring. I don't know if you knew that, but I discovered that later. But anyway, the flavor of it from the skins of the grape, but then also through the evaporation, it condenses. Well, as it gets more headspace, there's a certain point where you need to refill it again all the way to the very top with other barrels. You gotta be very careful about which barrel you pick to fill the other barrels. You want that barrel to be very healthy. Here's something we thought about. Currently what they do, like I talked about with the smoke taint. Now what's going on is that they don't have a reliable way to measure without waiting 45 days. So what they do is they do something called a microfermentation. So they'll go out into the field, they'll crush a bunch of grapes, they'll make enough juice to maybe have 5 gallons in a bucket like this. Well, what we're saying is we can put the device in there, it's wireless, and we can look at those levels at that moment within a few days, maybe even 2 days. Once it's, the reason why there's a wait is because you gotta wait a few days for the yeast to actually do its job. But in other words, I can have that result, or at least a yellow indicator of you're kind of at risk. There's enough of a level of those markers for smoke taint that are in there that you might want to look at this or decide if you really want to harvest or not. Like I mentioned, when it's full, there's this kind of all these markers that we were going to look at over time. Multiple devices, climate controls, looking at how we can optimize the energy usage within the facility with those thousands of barrels. Another one is when it's empty. So when barrels are empty, they fill it up with SO2 gas. There's a guy with a hazmat suit, and he comes in with a wand, and everybody gets the hell out of there. And he sprays the empty barrels with SO2 gas, which is not a nice gas to breathe. And then he goes barrel to barrel and seals them up, right? And then they put them at this little angle, and you can always tell when they're empty because they're at a little angle, and the ones are usually like this when they're full. Then they just leave it there for months, right? So what can happen is the SO2 can start to seep through, evaporate. Maybe they don't have a good seal. Maybe they didn't spray long enough. And the humidity can go up or down within that amount of time too. If the humidity goes up and the SO2 goes down, bacteria loves that, or at least has a chance to live. So what can happen is bacteria can grow on the inside of the empty barrel and ruin a barrel. Barrels are like $1,000. A good French oak barrel is way over $1,000. And there's no good way for them to monitor this. So there was a use for this as well. Oh, and the way that works too, by the way, there's an accelerometer in the device and it knows the angle that it's at. So if it's like that, we know it's an empty barrel, or they have a leak if it's like that. And if it's like that, they're good. These fit on tanks too. So like these kind of tanks, at the very top, you're gonna see a pipe coming out that's the right size for this guy, and it's also the right size for this guy. That's big, because for major producers like Kendall Jackson, like the Mondavi family, Constellation Brands, maybe Brown-Forman down the street, they're gonna like this, because this is how they're producing a lot of wine. Also has this augmented reality. Let's say I'm going through 15,000 barrels, I gotta be able to find this thing. I can hold it up and know which direction I need to walk through a facility, because these things are like multiple football fields big with barrels. I mentioned the quick battery change as well. That's a part of this. And I'm going to get into some of the tech and some of the, by the way, there's a patent. In fact, the patent is, we were just talking about this, the patent's being filed. The final patent, the one that was filed before, was a year ago, and now we're filing the patent this week that's about 40 pages long and 11 diagrams and covers like stuff. The vineyards we talked to over 30 vineyards. They're losing their minds. They want this to be on the market. They're pre-ordering. They're wanting to be on early testing just so they can get a discount and be involved early enough to where they can say, help shape and mold this thing as it comes out before it goes to market. There's other added benefits with the data. So the data itself starts to become really damn valuable over time. You can imagine that as we deploy these things by the thousands in Napa, you're gonna start to have collective data of every type of grape and every single batch of every single acre of where it's grown for a year based on the weather. This year's been a dry year in California, as usual. But that's good for grapes, actually. If we don't get the fires and it's dry, we're gonna have some damn good wine. So buy wine next year if we don't have fires. But the idea is that I'm gonna be able to tell them the history of this is how a Merlot grape did in 2021 when it was a dry season. So that when it's 2023 and I have that same harvest again, I can say, all right, similar conditions, here's what I need to do as far as the dialing it up. Maybe I wanna put these lower in the stack because I know it needs to evaporate less over time, something like that. But that data becomes more valuable over time. For sure, and we believe that with the model that the data itself becomes more valuable than the product. So you can verify to insurance, for instance, that you saw smoke taint markers in it before you harvested, because that's something that's happening where insurance is denying claims all over the place to vineyards because they didn't have the results of their test that was not coming back for 45 days, and they went ahead and harvested, and their wine is ruined. And they can't claim it on insurance. It's really fun. They can certify that nothing happened. For instance, if I have a wine that nothing happened over 2 years, I have a better wine that I can sell for more money, potentially. I can say, hey, this was perfect. We can verify the identity of a bottle. We can have visibility into that aging process, right? And then you can see how things fared. I mentioned that over year. We're managing it, or we're doing a managed service model. So we're not doing direct buy, we're doing a managed service model because we feel like it's gonna be more of a monthly cell phone type idea where I have a bunch of these, they're on a monthly fee. I'm able to have them in the facilities in the vineyards, but then the company actually still owns the device too. So when I need to update it, when I get better sensors, as I adapt over time with my V2, my V3, drop in the new electronics, we're good. Vineyards love that idea because they don't want to spend money on all the stuff and then own it. They want us to help them with the network, with the platform. We're looking at LoRa as our protocol, LoRaWAN. So we're not using Wi-Fi. We're using LoRa because LoRa has a range of about 20 kilometers in open space. In really, really condensed space, it's going to have about a 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer range maybe. But that's all I need. I don't need it to be 2 miles away. That's good to go. Initial launch is in Napa. That'll happen probably middle part of next year is what we're really tracking for right now. And then we're gonna have a stage 2 in the top 5 states in the US that produce wine. Then we go out to global from there. So the US is about 10 to 12% of the global market for wine. These funny shaped countries over here are about 70%. So we're gonna get it right in California and then go to these guys. The only problem with that is this. So a French barrel maker who's based in Bordeaux wants to partner with us. And they have a Napa office, but their big office obviously is in France. So that whole plan of the launch might get adjusted because they want to be selling this obviously on their barrels as soon as you buy a new barrel. This is attached to as an option, send it out the door and make money. They also like it because they're going to get monthly residual, or they're going to have monthly income, reoccurring income, and not just a one-time I sold you a barrel and I'm out. They like that. Plus we can personalize it. Why not? You buy enough of these, I'll put your logo on it. I'll make it red, whatever you want. Just buy a few thousand. But so this is something they like too, because when they release a new barrel, like a new version of what they do, like these, we can customize it to that product. So this company is amazing. They make amazing products. Their vats, their tanks, they're beautiful. This thing is a giant wooden sphere, which is absolutely just for show and for somebody to flex in their vineyard and say they have this giant sphere full of wine, and it's literally just for when tourists come in and they can say, wow, I have one of these. It's pretty cool though. Here's my board of advisors. I have a lot of people that I knew from, a couple of guys I knew from my days in Boston, long story. And then Mike Blum, who I talked about, who's my main wine guy as far as chemistry and warehousing and winemaking and all that in general. And that's pretty much it. And I wanted to make sure I had enough time if you guys have any questions or anything, thoughts, comments, would love to answer them. If you think of them later in the day, I'll be around here too. Go ahead. So the way it's installed is we have a team. We're gonna have a team and a truck, right? A crew that'll come out. Depending on the number that they got, they'll have those ready to go. Say it's 500 or something. They'll come out, they'll set it up with the LoRa. The LoRa hub is gonna either be installed or already there. But they only need about 1 or 2 hubs at the most. Maybe it really should be about 1, we estimate, really, with that kind of range, but maybe 2. And they'll come in, they'll set up that router. They'll set up the devices. The devices will only, this is a part of what was a challenge with the tech, is that we don't want that device to detect that there's a vineyard over here if it's got that kind of range and be like, I'm suddenly reporting the data to my competitor for my wine. So it's plugged into just that router, right? So we do the test. The batteries are already charged up. Drop the batteries in, we're good. They do the test of the initial, like they'll do a test firing to their mobile, probably a pad, not a mobile device. Their mobile device will probably be an iPad or something like that. They'll be able to say, this one's operational, and just go down the list. And then from there, it's simply just setting up a secure profile for the customer, for anybody who's involved, and there you go. And then it starts to work. Like, the way it works is it doesn't fire off data like once an hour. They don't need it that granular, like once a day is fine. So this thing will be in a dormant state, low voltage, with that LoRa protocol, come out, do a measurement of all those things current, because it's going to be accumulating over time. And it's ideal that it's once a day too, because it'll just kind of get the current state of those ions, fire that off to the hub, go back to sleep. But we can communicate with it if we need to, and I obviously can communicate with the hub, but there's not a lot of need for high data usage. There's not a lot of need for high current usage, which is ideal for the battery. And that's pretty much how it works, I mean, from a networking standpoint. So in other words, like they can add another 500, and we just come in, we plug them into that same router, or like I said, add another one, and we're good. Sorry? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it's similar. Oh, you mean that, the physical installation? Yeah, so that's a good question, okay. So the way that works is, let's say the battery's off. Similar thing to bourbon. With wine, it's a rubber mallet. This is stainless steel, the core. That core is stainless steel. Let me go back. Might be easier to see on the screen. Whoop, there you go. So this core in the center is stainless steel. This is silicon. Silicon's going to be around the outside. It's still going to have a sleeve of silicon too, but there's a strike plate on the top. It's a thicker on the top than this, so it'll come out as like a flange. They'll hit it with the rubber mallet a few times, probably, to pound it in. But the electronics are going to be fine, because the electronics are actually made for some pretty terrible situations. The electronics have been used in other environments, like for defense. They've been used. Literally, one of the customers of this place is NASA. So they've seen some pretty horrendous things. So they'll be fine with that, that rubber mallet hit. And then, of course, they'll just use the pry thing to get it back out. And in future markets, if once we say we expand to whiskey or to bourbon or to tequila, anything in a barrel, pretty much, we'll just drop another electronics in, whether it's measuring sugar, whether it's measuring alcohol levels, whatever it is. You know that barrel's going to be outside mostly, and you're going to have hot as hell conditions. We're fine there for tolerance. And it's 6 years, or more. So we'll be able to adapt for that as well. But yeah, it's just a strike plate that's on the top, and it's fine. Also rated to where, let's say you have a crew and they're up 20 feet high and they drop it. It's fine. It'll survive that too, because you'll have this. First of all, you'll have the silicon, so it might just bounce, which it'll take the impact. And then if it hits the bottom, it should be okay too, because it's steel. And it's all food grade too, right? So you want to make sure when if you're touching that wine, you don't want to corrupt it. You don't want to have a surface that's going to allow bacteria to actually grow on itself. So it's all designed to be as smooth. All these surfaces designed to, anything that's coming in contact with a wine is designed to be around food as well. Oh yeah, so money. I'm spending other people's money. So we just completed our first round of financing. We closed it. It was interesting, because at first during COVID, we couldn't get anybody to give us $5. And then COVID, the first wave of COVID started going fine. So people started investing again, and we started it was me really, just doing a presentation and saying, get in on this. So it's just, once that ball started rolling, it rolled. And so the vineyard started talking, and there was actually too much of a buzz in Napa, because I started talking to the vineyards and the cooperages and the warehouses, and then they all started talking to each other like, holy hell, have you seen this thing? And then I was like, oh hell, I gotta stop talking to these people. It's too much, I'm not on the market yet. Because you can have too much buzz. But, did I just go dormant? Yeah, I just lost my computer, because this is not plugged in. But I think I'm good anyway. So I got my financing pretty fast after that. And I actually exceeded what our initial target was. And I had to the board had to reauthorize the round for more, because which is a good problem. But it's funny because it didn't matter actually so far. So most of my calls were video calls, even though we were doing stuff in person a little bit more. I was going to Napa in person, and I was looking at like last year I saw when they had fires, and I was up there studying that. But the actual presentations to investors a lot of times were just a call, and me with this, with the business plan version of this, just talking it through. And it was challenging because they can't see me. I can't use my incredible charisma and sense of, this guy might be smart, of course. But no, it was just literally like a voice on the phone and then some slides. So I had to tell the story. So that's why I worked a whole lot on this presentation and on the business plan one, because I knew that is what they're gonna see. And if it looks like shit, you look like shit, and they're not gonna invest. So I spent a lot of time really, really sweating the details. And it's funny because I was listening to the audiobook about Steve Jobs' biography. This is one of those stories. But I was up in Mountain View, and I would go to Mountain View a lot, which is very, very close to the garage where Steve and Woz started Apple. And I started thinking about how he was incredibly caring about every single edge and what the packaging looked like and what everything. And now that I'm going through this, I'm like, oh my God, he's right. You really do have to do that, because that's what people are gonna see. They're not gonna see the thing on the market. They're gonna see whatever's on that slide or whatever is here or whatever, and have to make a judgment call. So first impressions definitely made a big difference in the financing and have made a big difference since then. And continue to be. I continue to have to kind of shut down the buzz because it's still too big. But every time I go up to Napa now, I get free wine tastings, and my wife loves it because they're all like, "Oh my God, come on in! Hey, let's go." This one guy, he had tanks like this, and he's like, "Come on in! I really want to show you some of the stuff we're growing," because he's a great guy. But he just starts pouring right out of the tank, right? This is $250 a bottle. He's just pouring. I'm like, we went around about 11 or 12 of those. I was ripped. He's spitting it out, right? Because he's just like spitting. I'm like, why the hell is he spitting it out? He's spitting it out in like grade like that. I'm drinking the hell out of that stuff. And so by the time I got to the end of that tour, I had to get some water. I think I probably had about 6 glasses of wine total. But anyway, when I go up there, it's nice because, I know that there's a lot of support. And that was the nice part of this so far, is that there's a need, and there was definitely a need to do this. There is a need for this on the market. I was surprised that nothing really truly existed. When we went to the patent search and we did all the IP search, there was not a lot there. Not a lot on the radar. There were some failed attempts. It was kind of like looking at the airplanes before the Wright brothers, where it was like 20 wings, and you're like, there's no way in hell that's going to work, but I want to watch anyway. And so you're looking at the patents from before, and you're like, holy crap, they got a device that's got this syringe, and it's putting the wine up inside itself, and it's injecting SO2 back into the, are you kidding me? Like, nothing, it was awesome. But that, but it took that kind of work, and it took that kind of research, and it took that kind of, time, which I had plenty of. So that's what happened. But I think the lesson, I don't know if there's a lesson, but it's more of if you got an idea in your head, and it's an idea in your head, you might try it. Try to see if it's actually out there. See, because to me, I think about those days, and I think I could have just left that as an idea in my head and assumed there's something out there. I'm not going to pursue it. Screw it. I'm just going to go to the next thing, go back to my job. And it could have ended up like that. But I think truly a lot of people have at least 1 or 2 damn good ideas in their life, and they may not ever pursue them. And that's really the difference, is that you pursue it and you stick with it, because it's going to suck. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have things that happen. It's going to require some self-funding for sure until you get to investor round and they actually want to give you their money. But because there's lawyers for everything. I have 5 different types of lawyers for every type of thing you can imagine. But there's no real big secret. If you have a damn good idea and you just stick with it, there might be something there for you. Yeah. That's about it. I don't know. Any more questions or any thoughts? Yeah. So there's two ends to that. There's a web app. So the web app is going to be, for instance, there's going to be an admin side to that Simple Labs, the company, will be using in our crew. Then there's the customer side of that, right? For them to come in, check, how am I doing, all that. And then there's going to be installation, right? But it's all cloud-based. So obviously it's cloud-based. Yeah, cloud-based. Amazon, AWS, or something like that. We haven't decided which provider, but I don't want to start that conversation too soon, because then they'd be like, hi, I'm AWS. Oh my God, here's a free mouse pad. No thanks. But yeah, actually, cybersecurity places have already started talking to me. I'm like, uh-oh. I'm not there yet, don't do it. But I will have to be mindful of that. Obviously, that's a big deal, is the cybersecurity side of it, because you can think of, well, this is really valuable data. And if somebody else had the data for all their competitors, holy shit, they'd have something really bad or really good for them. But so like security is a big deal, because it's gonna have to be a big deal, because it's gonna have to be pretty bulletproof to not let leaks happen. And if we're going to anonymize the data later for like broad sharing of knowledge, we're going to have to think about what level, almost like a patient record, right? A medical record. Like how much of that can I show and share for the good of the public, and how much am I going to need to hide because it's revealing too much? By the way, that was another thing. I couldn't say a damn thing. So you didn't even know this was going on for 1.5 years. Because I had to file all the patents, and lawyers were like, do not talk about this or I will come kill you. I had to my incorporation lawyer and my patent attorney were just like on my case, like, do not talk. Do not talk to your friends. Don't talk. In fact, don't talk to your wife about it. This has been 2 years. 2 years. But I mean, you know what? It was a hell of a delay. I mean, COVID was a hell of a delay. I mean, I would have been ready to go a year ago, I think. But it was actually a good delay, because I would go and I'd talk to a few wineries, because this guy Mike would tell me, like, talk to the small ones, and they're gonna give you feedback. And that's, for instance, like when I found out about empty barrels, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And they're like, yeah, if you can track that, that's amazing. So cool. So I started getting that feedback loop from user experience, like from the user experience days, like if I'm designing the experience side of this, I need to listen to people a lot and talk to people a lot and get that loop going. And so that led to incremental improvements and little pivots and micro things, but it led to a better solution to go to investors. But yeah, it's 2 years. It usually doesn't take that long, I don't think. And it's been an interesting thing with, by the way, with IP, there are people who have been trying to figure out what I'm doing. I have had a major brand out there really want to talk to me, and their head of R&D be very friendly and like, hey, we should have a meeting and talk about this. And I'm like, yeah, we should, shouldn't we? And so I had to shut that down. And I also like let my attorney know, like, hey, these guys called today again, just to give you a heads up. But so, yeah, I mean, the thing that's good is I incorporated in Delaware, which the reason why I incorporated in Delaware, because it's so friendly to tech startups. And if they try to challenge your patent, you just get a big paycheck and then keep doing business, I guess, most of the time. It's a game. I mean, it's a game out there. Yeah. I wish. I love bourbon. I would rather start with bourbon than wine. But the problem was because I sincerely love bourbon. Honestly, it's like home in a bottle. But the problem was the market size. We wanted to start with a bigger market, and wine was such a bigger market globally that we needed to, the smart thing to do was to do wine first. Plus, I'm in California, so it's like Napa's an hour away. I fly up there in the morning, I come back, and I don't even have to stay overnight. But bourbon, yeah, it's absolutely on the radar. I mean, it's easy to adapt this thing to. We're already looking at like, okay, what canister stuff would bourbon care about? I know some of them. I don't know all of them, probably. Because the environment obviously is different. The challenge is different. The aging process for bourbon is very different. So, and the fermentation and the active yeast and all that, that's some serious stuff going on. Temperature change and all that. But yeah, they haven't, but conglomerates have, right? So conglomerates have said, that own bourbon and wine have been trying to be friendly. But so far, you know, the thing we've told them is, or I've told them is, in my next priced round, like, if you want to get involved and be a partner, all you gotta do is invest, and then you can help me develop this thing over time, you know. But because you need to be careful with that. Obviously, it's like, okay, there's a side of it that where people want to genuinely, sincerely be a partner and invest their money and be with you on this and be in it, the game, or they want to be a partner and find out what you're doing to a certain extent and circumvent the legal process. So it's just a tricky thing, but it is what it is. But yeah, I haven't, not directly. Sure would love to talk to them about what would be important to them to measure. I think that's the thing that I would love to do my research there, because I would really sincerely love to have this thing, the version 2 or 3 of this be bourbon, you know, particularly. And the stuff in Kentucky, not the stuff in Tennessee. The stuff here, not the stuff, you know. I know that one. Any other questions? Yeah. No, it's actually, that's a good question. Yeah, so it doesn't impact or sway the numbers. One thing that we've figured out is not the steel itself, but when you get enough headspace in the barrel. In other words, we're actually gonna make this a little taller, right? So we're gonna make the steel a little bit taller, and the steel doesn't impact it, but there's a membrane that's waterproof. And so as soon as it evaporates, it gets down to the bottom of it, we know that the vacuum that's been created is gonna cause some issues for things trying to get into that when there's a vacuum pulling it. So we don't know what's gonna happen there. But the thing is, we know that if we design it the right way, by the time it gets to here, that's when they're supposed to top off the barrel anyway. So they're not gonna wait much longer. And we know the rate of evaporation because we knew how many days it took to get to there. So we can tell them, your barrel is now halfway empty and you have crap. But so like if it gets to here and the numbers start to just go off the charts or whatever they do, we're not sure in testing what they're gonna do. They might go 0. It's just a signal to them of like, it is time to top off your barrels. And here's the barrel we suggest to top off with because it's the best condition. There you go. But yeah, the steel's good because it's 316, I think is what we're gonna use. It's food grade, used everywhere for food. Steve.
What are you doing to prevent the data from being intercepted?
So yeah, that's the cybersecurity side of it. So we are going to have, without going into a lot of detail, it's a secure platform. We're gonna have layers of security to it. We don't know the exact way we're gonna do it yet, because we're not on the market yet. But we know that it's a challenge to solve, and we know some of the potential issues, but we also know that we're designing this to where you can't send stuff back to all these and mess up a whole thing of wine from North Korea, you know, or something like that. And that's another reason why I'll use LoRa, because LoRa has a very limited amount of data you can send per day. If we did Wi-Fi, that would be a real big deal, because somebody's gonna hack. But if we do LoRa or something like that, we're designing it specifically to where it's got a really good range but it's a little bit off the, and plus it's, it's just a matter of with AWS or the actual cloud platform, secure that. They need to be able to secure that, obviously, at a level 2. But it's a layered solution for sure, between the product itself, the platform, and the web apps and stuff like that. But yeah, it's complex. You said when? Ideally, I'd go to phase 4 in like 2 years from now. See, that's the thing. I don't know what's actually really going to happen. What really might happen, which we think is going to happen, which the older senior advisor guy, who knows, really smart guy from Harvard Business School, he said, you're just going to get bought out. He's like, year 3 or 4, somebody's just going to be like, go home. Which might happen, but I don't know, I might stick with it. But I think about year 4. But the thing is, I think what really is going to happen is a French company, an Italian company is going to come in who's got a global presence already, who's got the logistics already and the shipping already in place, who can say, work with us, we got a ground crew there. You don't need to have much of a ground presence except maybe an installation team or whatever, depending on the partnership. And they'll make some money, we'll make some money, and everybody will be happy. And but see, that might happen. But the thing is, I know I'm mindful of, as a CEO and as a company, is like, get it right in Napa first, no matter what's going to happen. If they offer you a lot of money, don't do it yet. Just get the product right and get it in the real world working, and know that 500 are going to work, 1,000 are going to work before you go to the major European market, because this is really different technology. They don't have anything like this. So it's difficult to get them to understand even what's going on. It's a UFO. So they're like, this sounds like magic. They're skeptical until they see the business plan. But so if it fails early on or has problems, it's going to be a big problem for us. So get it right in Napa, then go back to the old countries or whatever.